Hello, everybody in UK Crime Book Club land. I'm really proud to announce that we're going to be talking with Peter James today about his new book, Find Them Dead. Now, ably hosted as well with Lucy. Thanks for helping us out today, Lucy.
Hi.
Hi, Peter.
Hi, great to see you. Great to be here.
Oh, thank you so much for joining us. We've got lots of excited people hopefully tuning in tonight to see you.
Including my mother-in-law, so I have to be careful what I say.
Yes.
I won't talk about how to murder your mother-in-law and get away with it. I don't want to lose any sleep tonight. Yeah, so hi, only kidding, you know.
Yeah.
Sorry, Peter.
I said only kidding because she does take what I say quite seriously.
You didn't need to say that. I'm sure she knew that.
Could you tell us a bit about Find Them Dead, please? A summary of the plot.
Sure. Find Them Dead starts with Roy Grace on secondment to the Met Police, the Violent Crime Task Force. That's the unit that was set up by Theresa May and the Mayor of London and by the Commissioner of London Police, Cressida Dick, to try to tackle the growing knife crime epidemic. And I started going out with that unit myself about 3 years ago. And it was a real eye-opener in terms of what they were dealing with. And also, at that time, the county lines, the whole that expression, a lot of people don't really know what it is, was being talked about all the time. And it was clearly a major new form of drug distribution throughout the UK. And that kind of prompted me to want to write about it when I was first out. And so I thought it'd be great to have Roy seconded there. So the first few chapters of Find Them Dead finds Roy ending his 6-month secondment with the Met and returning to Brighton. The main heart of the story comes from really when I did time in jury service some years ago and was just astonished by, if you like, the kind of the lottery of it, for want of a better word. And the heart of the story revolves around a character called Meg McGallan. She's 43 years old. And we learn that 5 years earlier, her husband and son were killed in a tragic accident when they were driving home from holiday. And she and her teenage daughter survived. And she completely and utterly dotes on her daughter. The girl is now 18 and she is everything to Meg. And it starts with her daughter going off on a gap year to South America. And there's kind of two time periods in the book. And a little bit later, some months later, Meg gets jury service summons. And she finds herself on the trial of this major county lines drug dealer who's based out of Brighton. And she gets to the end of the first week of trial and she goes home and there's a photograph on the kitchen table of her daughter in Ecuador. And she's thinking, how on earth did that photograph get on my kitchen table? Who's taken it? Yeah. At that moment, her phone rings and a very menacing stranger says to her, "We know where your daughter is every second of every day. If you ever want to see her alive again, it's very easy. At the end of the trial, you have to persuade the jury to say just 2 words. And I think you know what they are."
Really fascinating premise. As a former law student myself, I was really interested in the research you did for the book.
It was the first, Find Them Dead is the first time that I've written a kind of a trial in a book. And part of the reason I wanted to do that was from the police standpoint is that in my Roy Grace novels, the vast majority of them have ended with the villain being arrested. But the reality for police officers is that the arrest is actually only almost the beginning of the process. It's the end of part 1. The second part of the process is the whole preparation for the trial and the Crown Prosecution Service. And then the third part is the actual trial itself, where I feel like all the hard work that Roy Grace or real life detectives put in to capturing a villain and bringing that person to justice can be completely lost on bad lawyering or on the whim of a jury, bad direction by a judge. There's so many things, a chain of evidence being messed up. There's so many ways it can fall over, and it's devastating to the morale of the police when that happens. And I did jury service myself back in 2005, and I was just astonished by the comments made by some of my fellow jurors. I think even today, 15 years on, we're not allowed to talk what happened in the trial. But I'll give you an instance that happened to a friend of mine much more recently. Was on a trial in Sussex, and one of the jurors was one of these typical tweedy kind of, Women's Institute do-good ladies, backbone of England. And the prosecution had started laying out the case against the offender. And about 2 hours in, they adjourned. And they hadn't even finished hearing the case yet. And they all sat in the jury room, and this tweedy lady said, "Well, the man's obviously guilty, isn't he?" And my mate said, "Well, we haven't even heard the full prosecution case yet, let alone the defense. How can you say that?" "Well, he's a homosexual."
Oh my goodness.
And I have to say that I encountered prejudice like that when I was on jury service. And I've had great help from two senior criminal judges. I actually sat on the bench with them during jury selection on a murder trial, on a major drug dealer trial. And they both helped me a huge amount on the research. Like, I sat in trials. And what both these judges and an Old Bailey judge that I sat with as well about a year earlier, my first research, also said to me was that so many juries do not convict on the facts. They convict much more on the story, on the emotion, whether they like the defense or the prosecuting lawyers, whether they like or don't like the witnesses. There is so much that almost like it's a sort of a theatrical play that goes on, where jurors really can be influenced one way or the other. I think mostly it works reasonably well, but if you talk, most police officers take the view the fact they've arrested that person, they know they're guilty, and that's also a slightly biased view. But the whole, I feel like the game of it fascinated me, and how you do get these random 12 people ultimately deciding the fate of a fellow human being. 12 people have never met each other. They can be completely diverse, like in Find Them Dead, from being a chef in an Indian restaurant, a Uber driver, a real Colonel Blimp, an insurance man. And they're going to make a decision that ultimately will make or destroy somebody's life forever.
Yeah.
We influenced it by 12 Angry Men, because I know you mentioned that in the book.
Yes.
Sorry, Alex, could you repeat the question?
We influenced it by 12 Angry Men, because I know you mentioned that in the book.
I have. I mean, my character, Meg McGallan, when she's got to try and turn this jury, she watches it repeatedly to see how they did it. And I remember it was a film I first saw as a child. And it's still a very powerful movie today. I mean, it is a little comical in that all the jurors are male. It's a fairly sort of misogynist film, but it's very much of its time. And they're all sitting away, puffing away on fags in the jury room. But that was a wonderful film. It was one of the big influences in terms of helping with the arguments that she used.
Yeah. It's Roy Grace, this is your 16th book with Roy. Is there any changes in research that you've done that you did with this that you haven't done with others?
I think probably more than any other, I had some pretty hairy moments out with the Met Police. We were chasing at two late shifts where they were chasing moped gangs. These horrible people, who snatch handbags. One incident involved was a guy who literally threw acid in a woman's face in order to grab her mobile phone, scarring her for life for probably a £30, £40 phone. And the really nasty thing with those guys, those moped gangs, is that they've been escaping the police for so long because they could just whiz down an alleyway, go down a walkway, and that's it. They've lost. And second time I was out, Cressida Dick, the Met Commissioner, had just sanctioned knocking off riders. That was very interesting. And I wanted to try to understand what was driving the knife crime, and also how the relationship between the kind of police and the local gang community really worked. And I saw a line, I actually saw this dialogue take place. It was a young-looking 14-year-old black kid who'd been stopped, and he had quite a big stash of Class A drugs on him. And the officer said to him, "You're 14, why aren't you in school?" And the kid just looked at him and said, "I make 100,000 a year. That's probably 3 times as much as you make, isn't it?"
Crikey.
And I have Roy Grace use that line, and he says to his wife Cleo, he says, how do we deal with that? And that is a big part of the problem. You've got the kids involved in county lines dealing. They are making big money at 12, 13, 14, 15, and that is a part of the problem. There are many parts to the problem, but that's one of them.
I believe that Lucy's got a question from the audience about the upcoming bits of the book. If you can go to that, Lucy.
Sorry, which book, Alex?
The audience question.
Let's have a little look. Yes, I think I know the one you mean. This will relate to your Roy Grace series, Peter. Mike Hemming from the group has asked, the longer a series goes on, how do you balance the backstory with the current? Obviously, you've had a big backstory with Roy Grace, haven't you?
Yeah, it's a great question. With every new Roy Grace novel, and I've just started writing the 17th in the series at the moment, I always think well, if somebody's going to just pick this book up, it's the first introduction to Roy Grace, how much do I need to tell them about his missing wife, Sandy, and all the other elements of the backstory? I don't want people to be baffled by that when they come across a reference to somebody, but equally, I don't want somebody who's been a loyal fan, who's read all 16, and have to go, oh, do I have to go for this description? So it's a real balance. But what I do enjoy is I love developing the backstory. Every now and then, throwing in a real surprise, even killing a member of Roy's team. I've done that, and without spoilers about who, but I've done that.
Well, I think we've got a question actually that relates to that from another group member in Australia who's already read Find Them Dead, and this is Elizabeth Frazier, Peter.
Hi, Elizabeth.
I hope this doesn't give too many spoilers, but she said she was puzzled when reading Find Them Dead by this is not death, sorry, this is by the mention of Guy Batchelor's imprisonment. So this is something else you've done to one of Roy's team, and she said that she couldn't recall this, and she wondered if she'd missed it.
Yeah, I think she must have
I
done.
think she did.
Yeah, it was in Dead If You Don't, I think. It's 2 books back.
Just the two.
Yeah, which without any two spoilers, but he gets into very big trouble
Yes,
guarding somebody he's having an affair with, and it
that's right.
all gets out of hand.
Sorry, I got him mixed up with the murder you were referring to, the
Um,
death.
but there is going to be an interesting development in the book I'm writing, because I know that those of you who know the Roy Grace books well, I get lots of wonderful letters from you saying how much you hate Cassian Pugh, and will Roy ever really get his revenge on him? It's
Oh, brilliant.
no spoilers, but it's coming.
I think you hint at it in Find Them Dead, don't you? If I remember, do you remember that, Alex? I'm sure there is a hint
Yeah,
that
yes,
something's going to
yeah.
happen, isn't it?
Yeah, Roy gets a letter from Guy Batchelor in prison.
It reminds me a bit of the relationship between Frost and Mullet. I think is a little bit of a little thing. Is that an influence on the relationship at all?
Yeah, a little bit, yes. I mean, one thing I've tried to be careful of is there is a kind of classic cliche in so much crime fiction, both on television and in books, of bosses hating their kind of, somebody hating their boss and whatever. And it does happen, but the reality is that the police is akin to a military hierarchy. You know, people do what they are told. But every now and then you do get a complete arsehole. I mean, I remember one some years ago in Sussex Police that, who was in a pretty high position and everybody hated. And he's my model for Cassian Pugh.
Yeah.
But I've tried generally not to have too much of the kind of the bullshit. I mean, I get the odd idiots. I've got one of my favorite inspectors is Panikin Ken Anakin, who makes a nervous reappearance, annoying Roy and the new one I'm writing. I've been really enjoying Norman Potting's erratic life over the years. And I have to be careful, because when I first wrote Roy Grace, Dead Simple, came out in 2005, language and political correctness moved on so much. Back in those days, Norman Potting could say pretty much what he wanted. Now, I have to be really careful what I write. And I'm very lucky. I've got a friend who's kind of really good at reading it and saying, no, I think that might offend somebody, and this might offend somebody, and that's not what. And my wife Laura is brilliant at that too. And she says, she's steered me very much into the kind of what is acceptable and what isn't acceptable now, both in terms of male, female, different genders, and just attitudes as well.
Yeah.
You've got to be so mindful. It's so easy right now to piss so many people off.
Very true.
And also, the police themselves are largely walking on eggshells. I mean, there was a superintendent in the Met quite recently who got suspended for telling his team he wanted them to be whiter than white.
Oh,
People just got to be frightened to open their mouths at times now.
Yeah. How important do you think it is to have a good background characters to the series, like Potting? Because I thought he's a great character.
Oh, he is. He's a brilliant character, Potting is.
I met Norman Potting when I was first going out with Sussex Police, which was quite a long time back now, probably in the late 80s, when Brighton Police Station used to have a bar.
Oh, gosh.
And in those days, it was the first duty of the night shift was to drive home all the piss day shift. And I was up there, and this old sweat, this guy in his kind of mid-50s with a bad comb over, collared me. And actually, I was delighted to be collared by him, because he talked for 5 hours over about 6 pints of beer. All his war stories, how he basically single-handedly did all the arrests that Sussex Police had ever done in the kind of preceding 25 years. And then he taught me his tawdry love life. And I just thought, one day you have to be a character in the future book. So When I came to start writing Roy Grace, plotting was just a natural fit. And I love characters. I think we read books not just, I think, to get we're driven along by the story, but we read books first and foremost to see what happens to the characters that we kind of are fascinated by and engaged with. The ones that we don't like as well as the ones we do like.
Yeah.
I mean,
very true.
What I love is I get an email probably at least once a week from a police officer somewhere in the world saying, "We have Norman Potting in our office."
I think we've all met a Norman Potting, though, in our lives, whether, even if we're not in the police. I'm sure I've met him and worked with him at some point, Peter.
Yeah, there are plenty still around.
Oh, I'm sure, most definitely.
When you started your career back in 1981, what made you switch to series in 2005 over standalones?
Well, I really wanted to be a writer. I always wanted to write novels, and I wrote 3 novels in my late teens, which I thought was first one I thought was the Great British Novel. Luckily, it never got published. It was terrible. But I got a job working in television in Canada, and I was writing a daily program for preschool children, and then I was involved in film and television. My then wife said, "You've always talked about writing a novel. When are you going to write one?" And I read an article in one of the newspapers, and it said, since Ian Fleming had died, there was really a shortage of spy thriller writers. There was only 2 or 3 really of note. So I thought I could write a spy thriller. So I basically made it up. I wrote it was a kind of spoof James Bond about finding a mole in MI5. It was called Dead Letter Drop. And to my amazement, it got published. And to my even bigger amazement, it didn't sell. 1,800 copies, and about 1,600 went to libraries. And I had a 2-book deal, so I wrote a second one called Atom Bomb Angel. That sold even less. And then I published this, commissioned me to write a third, and that's, I think, sold even less than the first 2 combined.
Oh,
but I was really downheartened, and I was at a party, and I met a then friend of a friend called Elizabeth Buchan. She's now a very successful novelist herself, but back then she was writing jacket blurb for Penguin. And I poured my heart out to her at this drinks party, and she said, "Darling, why on earth are you writing spy thrillers? What can you ever know about the world of spies? You're up against people like John le Carré, come out of the security services. Ian Fleming was in security services. You only ever write." She said, "People who read are intelligent. They can tell if you know what you're writing about or not. You'll only ever succeed if you write about something that A, you can research, but B, that you're passionate about."
yeah.
And around that time, we got burgled. And a young detective came to the house to take fingerprints, a guy called Mike Harris. And he saw my early kind of books. He said, "Oh, if you ever want any research help with the police, give me a call." And he was married to a detective. And we got friendly. And they invited my wife and I around to a barbecue at the house. This would be about 1984, I guess. And they had about a dozen of their friends, all of them cops. It was traffic, homicide, response, neighborhood policing, drugs. And just talking to these people was a real, that sort of light bulb moment. I suddenly thought, nobody sees more of human life in a 30-year career than a police officer. And when they realized that I was genuinely interested, they started inviting me out. They said, "Oh, come and spend a day with us out on patrol." And it got to a point by about the mid-90s where I'd sort of almost become part of the furniture society police. They'd phone me up if they're doing anything interesting. Say, "We're doing a raid tomorrow. Do you want to come along?" "Please, please." I think they knew that they could say things to me and I wouldn't rush off and sell it to the newspaper.
Right.
And I was starting to I'd moved from there into supernatural thrillers, and then more into psychological thrillers. And I was putting more and more police characters into my books. And then one day, which was a real turning point, another turning point in my life, it was 1997, and I was introduced to a young homicide detective inspector called Dave Gaylor. And we got chatting, and he said, "Oh, what are you writing at the moment?" And I was writing a thriller called Denial. He said, I was about halfway through it. He said, "Tell me about it." So I started telling him. He said, "Hang on a sec. Your detective wouldn't have done that. Why hasn't he got an outside inquiry team doing this? I don't think your character would have done that." And I thought, wow, this guy's got a really big bandwidth.
Yeah.
Something I learned subsequently, that really good detectives, so often, particularly on television, you see the senior investigating officer as a sort of bolshy, angry person. I think the worst portrayal I've ever seen was Tennant in Broadchurch. This constantly angry with everybody. The really good really good homicide investigators are actually incredibly calm people. And they're very caring people, and they bond with the victim's family. Yeah, and very often, even if they don't ever solve the crime, even after they've retired, they still stay on that case because it becomes personal. But what the really good ones have, and Dave Gaylor has this in spades, is two completely different character traits in one person. Firstly, to be a good detective, you've got to be incredibly anal. Because every major crime is a huge puzzle. It's hundreds, if not thousands, of tiny pieces you've got to put together. And yet so often, the crime is solved by a bit of luck or a bit of blue sky thinking, completely out-the-box thinking. And Dave has those two qualities. And he helped me on the next two books I wrote. And then in 2002, he'd been promoted to Detective Chief Superintendent and basically head of major crime for Sussex. And Pam McMillan, my publishers, asked if I'd ever considered writing a detective as a central character. So I went to Dave and I said, how would you like to be a fictional cop? And he just loved the idea.
Oh, brilliant.
And he is he doesn't look like Roy, but Roy Grace is completely modeled on him, on the way he kind of works, the way he thinks. And we have a kind of ritual for every Roy Grace novel. I get a new moleskin notebook. We sit at a particular table in a local pub, and we hammer out the basic kind of the basic plot, and about the basic kind of, I suppose, the first 20 chapters or so. And then he and my wife Laura and a few others read every 150 pages. And Dave particularly goes through all the kind of policing aspects of it to make sure that I get everything that Roy Grace and his team do or say accurate within the context of a murder investigation. And that's what's really helped, I think, get the book so authentic.
Brilliant. And you have some help from a couple of our group members as well, Kate Bendelow and Graham Bartlett, who have also helped you out with your novels as well, haven't they, Peter?
Well, when Graham was commander of Brighton and Hove, he was just brilliant to me. In fact, because Dave had retired from the police, although he was working on the cold case team, whereas Graham kind of, for a long time, was my kind of live eyes and ears inside the police. One night, Graham, it's in my novel, I think it's the one where the van goes into the water.
I can't remember which one. With
Dead Man's Grip. He and I drove around Southwick and Shoreham Harbour until 4 o'clock in the morning. He was trying to show me good deposition sites for the van and hiding places. So he was absolutely brilliant.
That's fantastic.
We wrote two non-fiction books together.
Yes, you have.
We wrote about policing Roy Grace's Brighton, and we wrote quite recently, it came out in February, Babes in the Woods, about the terrible murder of two small girls in Brighton back in '85. Just going back one more about my characters, Alex. Another of the characters that a lot of people love is Glenn Branson. And I first met Glenn in about 1986, and I was just put in a police car for the day, a response car traveling around Brighton. And I was with this big, tall black guy, so bald as a meteorite. And we were chatting. And I said to him, I said, he told me he was like 33. And I said, oh, you're still a PC. Are you hoping to get promoted soon? He said, no, I've only just joined the police. I said, really? He said, yeah. He said, oh, I was a nightclub bouncer. And then my first kid was born. And I looked down at him one day and I thought, you're going to go to school in a couple of years' time. And someone's going to ask you what your dad does. And I want you to be able to say something you're proud of. And I said, please. And I use that in the book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lovely.
What now that Roy's been in it for 16 years, he's now as high ranking, and of course, the higher you get in the ranking system, the less involved in the investigation. How have you found that as a challenge about writing about that?
No, so I'm just distracted by seeing a few notes. Somebody says, I love Norman quips, they make me smile. And the burglar did you a favor. It's a very good point you're making, because in the real world, Roy Grace, in the role of detective superintendent, would not be going out and getting his hands down and dirty anything as much as I have him. But I think my readers would be pretty annoyed with me if I just had him sitting at a desk pushing paperwork. But also, there is nothing to stop him. If any senior officer wants to go out, they go out. I know several chief constables who like nothing better than just to get out in uniform and go out in the streets or get out and go in a car. I can't think of many chief constables who don't do that quite regularly, who are good police officers. And it's perfectly feasible for someone like Roy to say, okay, I don't want to go any more up the promotion ladder. I'm already maybe higher than I actually even want, and I'm going to stay involved. And I think the best coppers are the ones that don't just sit in their ivory towers.
Yeah. Just with listening to you talking about this, Peter, and a few of our members have touched on the fact that you do so much intensive research with the police. Now, you actually said that you always wanted to be a writer. And one of our members, Jennifer Price, did ask, did you secretly wish you'd been a policeman? And whilst that may not have been your goal when you were little, has it crept into your life while you've been spending time doing research? Have you ever actually thought, you know what, I wish I had become a policeman after all?
It's a great question, and there are times when I'm out with them where they do really seem passionate about the job, and I think if I was 18, not sure what I was going to do with my life, it's something I would seriously consider. I think there's a couple of things that would kind of worry me. The first is, would I actually be brave enough? Police forget how brave they are at times. Just getting up. Many times I've been in the car and the officer will jump out and go straight up to some great big bloke in the street, so I'm going to search you. They go to the most terrible sites, the trauma. I know I'm very friendly with one traffic officer. Quite early in his career, he had to go to report of an abandoned car, and in the boot of that car were, I think it was a 2 and a 4-year-old child, both gassed to death by their mother. A horrible divorce, and she tried to frame the father, and she's, I think, now in jail for this. But he then had to try and resuscitate them and then go home and put his own children to bed. I think the previous head of the Met some years ago said wearing a uniform doesn't protect you from trauma.
No.
We forget all the time the horrendous things that the police have to deal with. I've been involved in some very ugly fights and some very ugly situations. And some comical ones as well. I remember but 7 or 8 years ago, I was in a patrol car, and we were called. No, so not called. We were just on patrol in a council estate outside on the edge of Brighton called Molescombe, and there were 10 louts walking down the street. It was about 10 o'clock at night, all with bottles in their head and necking booze. And it's a criminal offence in Brighton to have an open bottle of alcohol on the street. And I was with a very young sergeant and a very young, just out of probation, Indian woman police officer. And they got out of the car and confronted these youths. And I clambered out too. And I was standing at the back, and I always wear whatever I'm given. It's usually a fluorescent yellow jacket, either says police or observer on it. And I could see this is going to start kicking off, because they're saying, well, you're not going to take these bottles off us. And somebody starts shouting racist taunts at the woman officer. And the sergeant's radioing for backup. And this is going to break into a fight. So I'm thinking, right, what do I do? Do I run? I thought, do I get back in the car and lock the door? I thought, no, I can't lose face. So I thought, I'm going to have to get stuck in too. So I look around to decide which is the smallest one. I think I'll hit him first. And I'm standing with my right hand in my pocket because it's like freezing night, it's February. And one of them suddenly points at me and says, "Who the fuck's he?" And the sergeant, quick as a flash, he's with the FBI. And they must have thought I had a gun in my pocket.
Oh, God.
They all became like pussycats. Handed their bottles over. And I thought, respect.
That was your moment, Peter. You should have signed up there and then.
Yeah, great. What was the biggest bit of trauma that you managed to turn into fiction or use as fiction for Roy when you did?
The biggest bit of trauma that I've turned into fiction.
Or you managed to use it, like, yeah.
A few things, Alex. Actually, I mean, one just a very kind of was Dave Gaylor told me this story, which always fascinated me, of a woman walking her dog in a place called Salt Dean, which is over the east side of the east of Brighton, up on the downs, and her dog bounded off, and it came back with a human bone in its mouth. And that image, she's happily walking along, suddenly it appears with this thing in its mouth, and I used that in Looking Good Dead. I think one of the most harrowing things that I went to was an exhumation. There was a headless, handless corpse found in the countryside outside Brighton about 15 years ago, and was duly buried. And the police were never able at that time to identify it. And then with DNA and everything moving on, they decided to have another go. Oh, that's right. And they had a lead, and they found this abandoned cottage, and it had a magazine on the kitchen table, which was how to get rid of a corpse. And part of it was dismembering it, yeah. And so they had this exhumation, and it was in a town churchyard at Haywards Heath, and what they do is they did the exhumation at 6 o'clock in the morning, and they had put this tent over the grave, and they actually had the vicar came along. They filmed the whole thing, so if they ever did find the relatives, they'd be able to show how they'd done it respectfully. And he had a reverse funeral service in which he welcomed the body back into our world. But my God, as it came up, the smell was, I was inside this tent. I smelled dead bodies. Everybody was just kind of reaching and gagging. But it was very sadly, they never were able to identify it. They tried everything, even analyzing. They could work out that he was probably from Eastern Europe because of the diet he'd been eating and how that had a kind of affected part of his makeup.
Oh, goodness.
That was a pretty traumatic one. I've been out with the police in Moscow where the car's been shot at, and that was quite interesting.
Oh God.
I thought maybe I don't need to do quite this research.
Let's lighten the mood just for a moment. We'll get away from stinky bodies. We've had a question from one of my fellow admins, Will Templeton, Peter, who is asking, are you yet struggling to come up with more titles with dead in it? Or dead in them?
I struggle with every book. So if anybody's got suggestions for titles, please email them in to me. Because, we do it. I mean, it always seems to pop finally in the end, but it's always a struggle. And I always, I think titles are really important. I love titles. You know, we remember titles of our favorite books. You know, there are some great titles like Silence of the Lambs is one that.
Oh yes.
You know, Catch-22. Certain titles just become Rosemary's Baby, and I love writing thrillers too. I've just seen somebody said The Secret of Cold Hill was brilliant. I was creeped out for weeks. Thank you. The paperback of that came out last week, I think it was.
Yes.
You know, some of the titles of great horror novels. You know, I loved Stephen King. You know, The Shining was a great title. Title is really important, and I never intended to have dead in every title. What happened was Dead Simple just was the right title for that book. And then in the book, my early books, I had one-word titles. After my debacle with first two spy thrillers, I had Billionaire, then I had Possession, then I had Dreamer, Twilight. And the problem is there's no copyright in the title. So, yeah, Possession, we got terrible confusion when A.S. Bart's Possession came out. So I thought with the first Roy Grace, I would at least have two-word title. So it's very simple. And then Looking Good Dead just popped to my head for the second one. And the next thing is I started getting emails from readers saying, oh, is this going to be the Dead series? I like it.
Yeah.
I mean, I get readers saying, look, you know, it's very confusing because we can't remember which title's which. But I reply to that. I say, well, take any author of which you've read lots of books. Can you remember how many Stephen King titles can you remember? You know, how many Ian Rankins or Val McDermott's can anyone remember?
Yeah.
Or Billingham's, you know, whoever your favorite writers are. You can only really remember one or two titles, can't you?
Yeah. In my research for the interview, we Lizzie found that you work with Rankin and Val with short stories. What was that like working with such big names?
It was huge fun. They're both just great and very generous people. And Ian, I've always liked hugely, and it was for a charity. It was called Face Off. It's for a charity anthology, and so we had Rebus and Roy Grace working together on an old cold case about somebody who'd murdered an old rocker back in Brighton in the mods and rocker days, and confessed it to his doctor on his deathbed in hospital in Edinburgh. So Rebus and Siobhan came down to Brighton and met up with Roy, and of course Potting's trying to chat Siobhan up and get off. With Val, we wrote a wonderfully pervy story about a foot fetishist who actually collected real human feet.
Oh, goodness.
Footloose. And she, again, she's just, we had a blast working together on it.
I don't know.
Yeah. Whose character would you want to merge with Roy again if you were to pick someone that you've not worked with yet?
Who would I like to merge him with?
Yeah, who could he meet up with next?
I quite like Harry Bosch. You know, I think he'd be kind of fun. Yeah, I've always liked Connolly's books, so I think it'd be interesting for Roy to work with a transatlantic. I mean, I've had him work with a few times, the real NYPD detective Pat Lanigan, who's been a great help with when I've been researching in the States. And again, you were saying about sort of scary research, and I think some of my research into the mafia in New York was when I wrote that Dead Man's Grip again.
Mm.
It's pretty scary. I remember Pat took me to this bar, which, in fact, well, it's now a youth club but it used to be known as the Gemini Lounge, and it was
Mhm.
the Gambino family, and it was
Ah.
he reckoned that they murdered. It was a factory for killing people.
Uh-huh.
If you ever went to the Gemini Lounge, you never wanted an invite to the VIP section.
Ooh.
They had one person who would tap the person in the back of the head. They had a second guy who'd shove them in the bath. Third guy who basically chopped them into 5 bits, head, legs, and say 6 bits torso. And then a delivery guy who'd take them off and drop them in different dumps around New York City and the area. And I
God.
think the NYPD reckoned they'd murdered over about 150 people in a 10-year period there.
That's phenomenal.
Yeah, the
It's
scale.
not just
Yeah.
the movie, is it? It really is real life then.
Yeah, and there was that wonderful character. He was Joey Gallo, who was eventually he was a made man for I think it was the Gambino family,
Mm.
and he was basically their debt collector, and he kept a full-grown lion in his basement. And if you ever owed the Gambinos money, he'd take you down to the basement. And he said, "Do you want to pay them what you owe them? Would you like to play with my pet?"
Probably guess how they answered that one, Peter.
Yeah.
I'll pay. My
In the
goodness.
in crime novels, it's really important to have a good villain to scare people with. What's your most favourite one that you've written about?
Oh, I think my favorite villain has to be Tooth. I think he's my most popular one too. And he actually came out of that same research with Pat Lanigan. He told me about this guy who was known as the Iceman, who was utterly kind of cold-hearted. I mean, to the extreme. Would sort of torture his victims and film it so that his clients could see that he'd done a nice job. And I really enjoy creating him, and I love the fact that he had his pet dog, and occasionally took him a souvenir back.
Yeah.
I think there's one book don't want to spoil it, but he takes him back the victim's testicles, I think, as a snack.
Nice. Well, just to be completely different, I mean, we obviously we know you and love you for your Roy Grace series, Peter, but we do know you and love you for your standalone novels as well. And I know after your spy thriller outing, you started doing your standalones, whether they were more psychological thrillers or supernatural. Because I know the first book of yours that I read was Sweetheart. And I absolutely loved that. It was a super introduction to your writing, and your standalones. You do, like with Roy Grace, you pick a subject that seems very relevant or is going to become relevant in the not too distant future. I was thinking of Perfect People and the subject matter in that. What informs your choices of the subjects you tackle?
It's usually it's got to be something that really interests me to spend a year, 2 years of my life learning about. And like, I mean, Perfect People actually took me 12 years.
Oh my goodness.
And then Absolute Proof, 25 years.
Yes.
Standalone that came out 2 years ago. And that literally was a phone call out of the blue back in 1989 from the Italian guy. I said, "Is that Peter James, the author?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Thank God I found you. It's taken me 2 weeks. I phoned every Peter James in the phone book in the south of England." I'm not a lunatic. I was a Fleet Aeron pilot in the war. I'm a retired university academic. I have absolute proof of God's existence. And I've been told on the highest authority that you're the man to help me get taken seriously. And that was kind of the starting point. And then from there, I went, long story short, I went to see a great mate of mine who was at that time Bishop of Reading. And I said, if somebody could claim to have absolute proof that God did exist, what would happen? He said, "I think he'd be murdered, because whose God would it be? You'd have every different faction of the Catholic Church, Anglican, Islamic, Jewish,
Yeah.
and you'd have communist countries like China not wanting a higher power. And I thought, I'm making some great thriller here. But it took me 25 years to research all the world's religions, in between writing Roy Grace and everything else. And then I got a new standalone coming out on October the 1st called I Follow You.
Yes.
The inspiration for that was my wife, Lara.
Ah,
She is a very keen runner. She's run
right.
13 marathons. And she was using an app called Strava,
Uh-huh.
and when we were living back in Sussex, she said, there's somebody that started following me.
Mm.
I don't know, but every time I go out on a run, I'm seeing this person there. And I know it's a he, and he obviously can work out where I live because it's a starting point.
Yes.
And I suddenly thought, wow, this is really interesting because we are using all these different apps all the time.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, the amount of, as you say, I love to write about something that's current, and the amount of personal data that we put out, people can find so much about us, including where we live, in a very, very quick space of time.
Mm-hmm.
And that fascinated me. So I Follow You is about a gynecologist who becomes utterly infatuated by a woman who nearly runs over.
Mm-hmm.
It reminds him of his first ever crush when he was 16, who then dumped him. And he becomes obsessed with her, and he discovers that she's out running when he nearly runs her over. So he takes up running, start following her, and the story kind of obsession goes on from there.
Seems to be a recurring theme, doesn't it, a little bit? Stalkers and things. You've had a few in your Grace books and whatnot. And is it something you've experienced, Peter?
Yeah, I had a stalker for about 12 years.
Goodness.
Not you, Lucy.
No, not me. Not me. I'm a good girl, honest.
You just been a great supporter for years. No,
It was a terrible reputation, Peter.
No, it was years back. Maybe she's watching now. Hi.
Oh.
No, it was years ago, and I doing a talk at Waterstones in Bristol, and there was this lady sitting in the front of the audience, and she kept looking at me like she knew me. Anyway, I thought, oh, I should come out and get a book or something, or say hi, and she didn't. She just vanished. Then about 10 days later, I was in a big public library in Birmingham, and there was this lady again, front row, and I thought she looks just like the one from Bristol. And again, she vanished. And then I'm in Ipswich about 2 weeks later, and she's there again. And I got an email from her saying, "Oh, dear Peter, I like the way you smiled at me. I thought you looked nice in that black T-shirt." So I always try to make sure we reply to every single fan. So I pinged her a polite thank you. Boom, an email came straight back with a question. So I answered that. But a minute later, another question. So I thought, back off. 2 hours go by, I get an email. I haven't heard from you for 2 hours. Are you still all right? And anyhow, she then started coming. She was going to every talk. If she couldn't make it, she'd email and apologize. And she started buying a book. She'd buy the same book over and over. I mean, she can't be getting the bestseller list. She'd buy probably 10, 15 copies of the same hardback over a period of time. And this went on for about 5 years. And then she sent me, she said, I thought you'd like to see my Peter James collection. And it was like a serial killer's dungeon.
Oh.
It was a whole wall lined with photographs of myself, my then partner, taken with a long lens in the garden of our house, coming out of restaurants all over England when I was on book tours.
Oh, great.
And I talked to the police about it. And at that time, with stalking laws, they couldn't do anything. And they said, we can't really do anything unless she kills you.
Great.
It carried on for about another 3 years. And then I was doing a talk, I think it was in another Waterstones, I think it was in London. And she completely changed her appearance, razor her hair. I didn't recognize her. And she asked, somebody signed this book. I said, what name would you like? Mine! And she sent me like a 10,000 word email. I've been your #1 fan for the last 10 years. I can't believe you didn't recognize me. Some experience of it.
Yeah.
Goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we can feel it.
Yeah, definitely.
Goodness me.
Just thinking about if you were to include Roy's son.
Someone sorry.
If you were to include Roy's son as a standalone book, where would you go with him? Because he's got several strange tendencies.
Well, I am thinking, it's interesting you say that. I'm thinking of writing a novella called Sandy's Story. Which is what happened when Sandy left Roy and the years in between.
That's interesting.
It's in my sort of mind to write it one day.
Yeah, because Alex and I were talking earlier, and I did say to Alex, I was wondering, because Bruno does seem to have a few quirks, shall we say. He's not the most straightforward of teenagers. But I was wondering whether or not you would, as Alex said, you know, we were thinking, I wonder if you would take a spin-off and write about Bruno, and he could be at odds with his father Roy, and Bruno's turned into some strange serial killer or something in his own right, and his dad has to go after him. We were probably getting carried away, Peter, but you know.
I do like the idea of a homicide detective having a serial killer for a child.
Wow, you've almost created the monster.
Yeah.
I do. I always love creating the kind of the villains, and I get a lot from people that I just meet. You know, I do a lot of talks in prisons, trying to encourage literacy in English prisons. One of the charities that I'm involved with is a reading agency, and every now and then I'll meet somebody in prison, and I think you would be a perfect character. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Jodie Bentley came out of that in Love You Dead.
Yeah.
I met this woman in a prison, and she was asking really bright questions about literature. I was fascinated what she was in for, and you never actually say. After my talk, I went up to her, and I never say what he'd done. I said, "Oh, how much longer do you have to go?" And she said, 9.5 more bloody years. And it's just not fair. A woman did just what I did and done, and she's only got 6 more years. I said, "Oh, you know, what brought you in here?" Said, "Well, I poisoned my mother-in-law, the old bag." Okay. She said, "Well, the thing was, she went to hospital to die, so I embezzled her bank account. The bloody woman didn't die. She came back home, so I realized she'd find out, so I had to poison her. Then I realized my husband would find out, so I had to poison him too. And it's just not fair. A woman did exactly what I did and done, and she's only got 6 more years."
Wow.
And I said to the doctor, I said, "Was this for real?" She said, "Oh, yes, sir. Husband was 3 months on life support. He's got permanent brain damage, and she's just angry about her sentence."
Oh my
You were
goodness.
going to be in a future book. So I down-aged her and made her into Jodie Bentley and Love You Dead.
Wow. My goodness. We are almost getting close to our time. We're almost there, but I've got one question from a fellow author in the group, Peter. Susan Handley has asked, do you have a favourite author?
I have several favorite authors. I guess the biggest influence on my writing and the author I know probably my career to was Graham Greene. When I read Brighton Rock, I put that book down, and I thought one day I want to try and write a book set in Brighton that's 10% as good as that book. It's probably more favorite books than, I love Silence of the Lambs. I think that's one of the great crime novels of all time. I wish I'd written it.
Yeah.
I really do like Ian Rankin's work. There are so many. I love Jeffrey Deaver. I like quite a few of I like Harlan Coben as well. I tend to sort of carry it often more. I love Linwood Barclay in Canada. There are so many authors I love, and not just within the crime genre. It's I always try and read widely.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Really great book, and I get sent new books all the time by publishers asking if I would give a quote. And the joy is when I pick up a book by an author I've not heard of, and I go, "Wow,
Yes.
And that maybe happens once every 5 years. It happened when I read Claire McIntosh's first book. I thought, wow, this book is gonna fly. And I'm full of admiration for it.
Oh, brilliant.
Did that influence your Harrogate selection when you were chair?
It did, yes. I mean, it was really hard because Harrogate, they ultimately can have so few authors. It's more like, who am I going to leave out? And that was really tough. But it's a great festival.
Yeah, because you tried to go global with some of the panels, and then, yeah. Well,
Yeah, they wanted me to try and bring an international feel to it. And it was a lot of fun doing it. It's such a great event.
I think, have we got any more questions from the audience, Lucy, to close off with?
Let's just have a little look-see. I mean, there was just something I really wanted to quickly ask you about, Peter, because I've done a few interviews with a few authors now, not loads by any means, but it's interesting that some of you have been screenwriters or playwriters before, or have worked in television, and we know you've worked in film and television. And how much does that inform the way you plot and the way you write your stories? Because I've had some authors say they see it in scenes. You know, they can't get away from that playwriting or that screenwriting thing, and they see it in scenes, and that helps them plot it. Did any of that influence your writing from your time in film and television?
Yeah, well, I remember selling a pilot comedy show at ABC television, and they work in like what they call it, the writer's box, and you work with about 10 other writers. And they said the first rule of sitcom is you have to have a gag every 14 seconds. Because they literally, people, half the audience are channel surfing at any given moment. So you catch them with a gag. Well, that was quite funny. Then they catch them with the next one before they move on. And they kind of stay. I don't have a gag every 14 seconds, but I do think of that principle that if I let go of my reader, they're going to do something else. They're going to do a game or watch television. You know, there's so many million different things they can do. Mm-hmm. I think the other thing that's informed me is short chapters, and you know, we've become used to getting probably most of our entertainment on television, and for those of us who are crime addicts, you know, there's plenty to feast on all the time on television. But the way television, you go cut. It's all very short. So I tend to kind of slightly mirror that in my writing. I love short chapters because I also I write the way I like to read. And I tend to read at night. I'm tired. If I pick up a book and I see the chapter's 53 pages long, I think I'll sod that. I'll have that tomorrow. Yeah. But I say, oh, that chapter's only 2 pages. I'll have that. And then, oh, next chapter's only a page and a half. Oh, next chapter's only 3 pages. Next thing I know, it's 3 in the morning and I'm still reading.
Yeah, it's certainly a way of reeling you in, isn't it? The short chapters are.
Yeah, and I think it chimes with how we see film and television these days.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we are up with our time, Peter. We're 5 minutes over, so thank you for the extra 5 minutes. Pleasure. Alex, I'm sure you'll want to say your thank yous too.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for this, because it's been such a unique learning about all your research, because of how much you've had to do. So thanks very much.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for having me on. It was great to see you. And I'm sorry I haven't been able to respond to all the comments just pouring down in front of us. I see them.
I know. You'll have to get Lara to log in, get her to join us, or your mother-in-law, and she can relay them all to you.
I'll get Mags to give me a catch up.
That's it. But it has been lovely to see you and talk to you again, Peter. One day we'll do it again in person.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Great to talk to you guys too. Yeah. Have a good evening. Bye, everybody. Thanks for watching.
Bye.
Thank you, Peter.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.